This is not a drama video, but it's a video about Booktube drama in a different way. There. Welcome back, everybody, to me talking about something book adjacent. And today we'll be talking about the thing that some people call Booktube, where I claim it doesn't exist because there's something going on that I feel we might address. And this is not explicitly about recent things happening on Booktube, but about something that I've been thinking about for a long time. So I'm just using recent events to talk about a couple of things. So I will not get into any specific details about, say, Willow Talks Books, or before that, Please Read Your Book, or any of the other so many times a person who makes videos about books on the internet decides to leave and step away after some conflict happened, and then everyone makes videos about like why we really shouldn't have gone this far, and so forth. There's a cycle going on, and I think there's a deeper issue with how bookish content on YouTube in particular happens, and that's what I want to talk about. So no details about anyone. I'm not going to tag any channels because people have their own stuff to do. I just want you, if you are someone who watches videos about books on the internet, and in particular if you are someone who makes videos about books on the internet, no matter the size of your channel, I want to listen to what I have to say, and then maybe think about what I have actually said, and then do your own things after that, right? So we'll be going through this in more or less two steps. Part one is I'm going to talk about what, Booktube is. I've had, opinions on that in the past, but we'll have to go through some of that stuff in more detail today. So we'll talk about what Booktube is, we'll talk about the internet, we'll talk about the responsibilities of being on the internet, what that means, and so forth. And once we've gone through all of the theoretical stuff, we'll go through the Booktube drama cycle, because then we can apply all the things that I've tried to say before, and then maybe we'll come out of this slightly less, frustrated, all right? And there will be book recommendations in here. I'll just front load them, but I'll mention them later again. If you want to read more about this, because you are someone who is interested in books, read Enshittification by Cory Doctorow if you want to read a really new one on parts of what is going on. If you are interested more in the creative industries and how they are changed by, platforms, capitalism, all of that kind of stuff, read Cory Doctorow and Rebecca Giblin's Choke Point Capitalism. It even has an entire chapter just on YouTube and how Google or YouTube as a platform impacts people who make videos on here. You might actually learn something there. Or I would also, if you want to read more theoretical stuff, read Shoshana Zuboff's The Age of Surveillance Capitalism. It has philosophy in there, but it also lays out a lot of the basics of stuff that is going on. And when it comes to how the effects of, online harassment in particular, I would recommend Alia Dastagir's To Those Who Have Confused You to Be a Person. It's about, in this particular, about harassment that women suffer online and how they deal with it. But you can apply those experiences to all kinds of other people as well, because, harassment is harassment, and, everyone suffers it, just some people suffer more of it. But yeah, that's one that I would recommend reading. I'll mention those when we come to the specific points. Just wanted to front load that kind of stuff. Let's get started and talk about, what I mean to say here. All right, let's talk about Booktube exceptionalism. And just like American exceptionalism, it doesn't really exist, and it kind of exists, and we need to overcome it because it causes a lot of harm. All right, I've spoken about how I don't think that Booktube is a thing, and I agree, I still stand by that. But we need to understand that there are some people who think of themselves as Booktubers, and that group is somewhat different from, say, everyone on YouTube at large. There's a bunch of reasons for that, and we don't need to go into that too much, but I think it is a good idea to look at what kind of people do, make videos about books on YouTube in particular, not book talk, right? And the bookish community on YouTube, or the different bookish communities that, are oftentimes have different demographic, distinctions, right? In general, I would argue that a lot of people that talk about books online, on YouTube in particular, skew somewhat older than the general sort of like social media, well, or at least than YouTube, and in particular skew older than, say, people that talk about books on TikTok, for example. So people are somewhat older, in their mid-20s and above, all the way to in their 60s, 70s, and I presume older than that even. And that comes with certain, experiences and lack of experience in some ways. Some people talking about books online right now did not grow up with the internet, or grew up as teenagers with, the 90s and 2000s internet, which is not the same as the platform-driven, app-driven mobile internet that we are living with right now. And we need to reckon with that and keep that in mind, because we are living in a different world. So some of the experiences that we grew up with don't actually hold anymore. That is important. All right. The next part that kind of comes from that demographical sort of like difference to, say, people that do gaming YouTube, or people that do some kinds of other stuff on this platform in particular, is that many people talking about books on YouTube, by virtue of being somewhat older, do have other things going on, right? This is a hobby for a lot of people. People don't necessarily make money on YouTube with this, and even if they get some money, most people talking about books on YouTube don't do this as their full-time job. And that, in this day and age, it's unfortunately a privilege. You may know that getting jobs is not exactly the easiest thing to do, or if you have jobs, or several jobs to pay your, stuff, you may not have the time to actually talk about books on the internet. So people that have channels, whether they are successful or not, may have a different perspective on what it means to be online, what it means to do YouTube, than, say, younger creators, say creators that have sort of economic incentives to do YouTube things. We need to keep that in mind, right? That is the next important part. The next part is size, right? YouTube is a huge platform with like millions and millions of people uploading shit every single day. Very few channels get really, really big. And even when it comes to sort of communities, sub-communities on YouTube, the bookish community has, well, some really big channels, but very few. Most people having channels talking about books, perceiving themselves as booktubers in one way or another, are smaller channels. Couple of hundred subscribers, maybe a couple thousand subscribers. If you're like over 10,000 subscribers and talking about books, you're already like really, really basically Booktube royalty. Well, let's not even talk about the people that have over 100,000, right? That also is important because it gives a lot of us, I think, and I've slowly moved away from that, but I feel it's important to keep that in mind. Like, we sometimes feel that a lot of the bigger YouTube stuff and YouTube drama kind of doesn't really apply to us because we're just like small channels, right? We don't actually do this for money, and we only have like, I have like 1,700 subscribers, so does this really matter for me? And I would argue, yes, it does. So let's move on to that second part, right? One thing that comes with the territory of being older, that comes with the territory of maybe not doing this in as involved a way and being, constantly extremely online, so all the time, like that comes sometimes with age, at least for some of us, is that we still differentiate between the real world and online, and that is bullshit. We live in a world where that is no longer true. We have smartphones with us all the time, right? We scroll on our smartphones a god awful lot. Even if you're not on YouTube, or even if you're not on Twitter, or not on Facebook, or any other of these social media platforms, you are constantly connected to the internet, whether it is just checking the news, checking the weather, checking sport results, whatever it is. You are constantly online, and you have the internet in your pocket with you all the time. That means the internet is part of the real world, whether you want that or not, whether you want to accept that or not. And don't even start with like, I don't scroll on my phone all that much. It doesn't matter. The internet is all around you. It is reality. And that is something we need to accept and need to fundamentally live with. Because that means we need to behave on the internet, on social media, on like any other platform on that we use our phones, our computers, or whatever for. We need to behave in the way that we would behave anywhere else. That is the fundamental thing. That means, don't constantly, yell at people things that you would, also not yell on, say, a full market square or on the street. Don't do any of those things, because this is your life now. You have to live with that. There is only one world, and we need to accept that. The next part is, of course, responsibilities, which is, learn the lay of the land, understand what we are doing with, what can I do, what shouldn't I do, how does this function? And that doesn't mean just the technology, just like how to use a platform, which buttons to click or anything of the sorts. It also means the social rules, the social responsibilities. And one of those responsibilities is understanding who is running the technology that we use to interact with each other on like a daily basis. That's where we talk about capitalism for a second, right? We have to. When we're talking about YouTube in particular, this is, of course, a web application, a YouTube streaming service, a video streaming service that is owned by Google, which is called Alphabet, and so forth, right? This is a platform. It's a privately owned company. It's a private company, which means they make the rules under which we engage with each other. They also make those rules for everyone. That's the point, right? Even though our channels might be much smaller than those of, I don't know, Mr. fucking Beast or whoever is big right now. Doesn't matter. The same rules apply to all of us. Whether it is the YouTube algorithms, whatever they may be, whether it is YouTube's terms of service, whether it is, things that have happened, like the mechanisms of how people interact with this platform, with people who are on the screen versus people who are in front of the screen. All of these mechanisms apply to all of us. Size doesn't matter when it comes to YouTube channels. That is an important thing to keep in mind. And one of the things that I often see with, I already mentioned that with like people who make bookish content, it's like, well, I don't have to care about social, say parasocial experiences because I only have like 500 people watching me. That doesn't matter. The mechanism is still there. Same goes for monetization or whatever, right? Like that doesn't matter. The same system runs all of this. Which means one of the responsibilities that we all have is to be aware of the world that we live in, be aware of the platforms that we are using, and trying to understand them. Because if we don't, we're kind of fucked, right? That is important to understand. All right, now that we've hopefully started to go real here, let's sum all of that up. And that's, once again, where you should read something, say, like Choke Point Capitalism, if you want to get like a quick understanding of how these platforms work, because they have different incentives. The goal is to maximize revenue, and that is maximize revenue by, getting engagement, getting people on that specific site to, maximize ad revenue, ad exposure, and so forth, which is the only way they use that system. They run this marketplace. We are, basically in their specific fief, as Yanis Varoufakis would call it in his book Techno-Feudalism, which you could also read if you wanted to. The point is, they run the platform, and we provide everything for them. And they can change the rules whenever they feel like it, and they can manipulate the rules whenever they feel like it. One example, I just pop it out for a second here, and we'll see why that matters, for example, that Cory Doctorow brings up, is that TikTok, when TikTok wants to add, say, another sort of like type of content to its platform, when maybe there's not enough, say, sports content on TikTok in the past, what they usually do is take 1 or 2 or 3 content creators who are already making sports content on TikTok, and they jiggle the algorithms so that more and more and more people see that specific content. TikTok's owners, in this case, the platform TikTok, makes that specific content go viral. Which means that blows up. Other people see it. Other people see that this is currently huge. More people start watching sports stuff on TikTok. The TikTok sports community grows, and so forth. The thing is, however, once they have enough engagement in that specific field with that specific type of content, they turn down the knob for like virality that they had on those original content creators. And if those creators at the time have gotten used to that specific amount of attention, the numbers, possibly money, and all of that kind of stuff, that suddenly drops away. I'm just bringing this up as an example to show you who actually runs the system, what you need to understand, no matter the size of your channel. And even if you're not watching, even if you're not creating and just watching and so forth, be aware of what is going on here. That's what I mean with the responsibility for all of us is to understand these platforms, which, once again, read something like The Age of Extraction by Tim Wu. Read something like Choke Point Capitalism by Cory Doctorow and Rebecca Giblin, which once again looks in particular on how these forms of capitalism, these forms of organization and technology have changed the world of specifically art and creative industries. That is important stuff. Read that, understand it, and go from there. All right, now let's look at the next step here, which is what happens with the internet. Now, the internet has, in one way, done something magical. It has reduced geographic distance. That is great. It means that we can talk to people who have the same interests as us, no matter where they are, no matter when they are, when it comes to, say, time zones and all of that kind of stuff. That is cool, right? That's how all these small communities have formed, and I can finally talk about the most obscure nerd book that I'm interested in and so forth. However, there are other elements that come to that, and that is everyone is suddenly visible. The internet is for everyone, and everyone, for the first time really in a long time, means everyone. Let's talk about that part. Let's talk about mental health. Let's talk about marginalization, all of those elements. See, if you are not part of, say, the big guys, by which I mean white, cis, hetero, male, and so forth, right? You are probably are marginalized to some point. And the further out that gets, the bigger marginalization, the harder it will be for you, or was for you in the past, to find people that have the same issues that you have, the same experience. It's harder to share those because geographic distance. It's the same with like the obscure, interests, right? I had to find people to play Dungeons and Dragons with in the past that, by going to the next game store and talking to people and hoping that there were enough people interested and so forth. I don't have to do that anymore. That is a relatively easy problem. What about people who are marginalized in one way or another? What about people with a specific chronic illness that, maybe they're the only person in their entire city with that? And sometimes it's just good to talk to someone else. What about if you are, neurodivergent? What about if you are part of the LGBTQIA plus, spectrum community in one way or another? It could be really hard to find connection, to find people with similar experiences in the past. And with those forms of marginalization comes a lot of trauma, pain, and so forth in general, which makes you vulnerable. Now, the internet comes along, and a lot of us, me being both, neurodivergent and having a physical disability by being blind, for example, I have the same issue, enjoyed the same thing, right? I'm not accepting me here. My point is, a lot of people with their marginalizations and their being different from, hegemonical, the hegemonical sort of society view suddenly showed up on the internet and became visible. We all went online and we found people that were like us, and that was really cool. And for a while, it was just us. And then more and more, everyone moved into this new space, and now it is the shared world with the outside world. But we're still here, and you can still see us all the time in a way that you didn't have to in the past. And that's where a lot of conflicts arise, because seeing someone who's not like you can be jarring from time to time, and having to see us can be hard. It's hard for me sometimes to see people or interact with people that are so far from my lived experiences that it can be jarring and difficult. But it's something we all have to understand and realize when we are interacting with the internet. It also means that it sometimes feels that certain communities are just full of, say, neurodivergent people, are full of people with mental health struggles that are more visible, are full of all kinds of things, right? My point is, we need to keep in mind that a lot of us are on here talking to each other in this part of the world, the digital world in this case, with different packages. We're all carrying a lot of shit with us around, and that stuff can make us vulnerable in all kinds of ways. Let's get back to platforms. Let's talk about what these do, because that's the next step that we need to look at, right? If you are someone who has struggled with finding connection because you're socially awkward, because you have, you are marginalized in one way or another, you come on the internet, you suddenly get attention, you find people that talk to you and so forth. That is good. That is really good. That feels good. It is good. Now, if you translate that from, say, people hanging out on Tumblr or whatever back in the past when the internet was good, that was all fine. Now you're trying to go to like a platform like YouTube, where algorithms are built in that, parcel out attention and so forth in a way that maximizes revenue to the platform Google, not in the way that is, natural in any way, shape or form. It turns our social interactions into, well, a Skinner box, basically. Now, if you don't know anything about Skinner, behaviorism, psychology, the guy with the pigeons, the idea and something that Skinner learned, and, you can read Shoshana Zuboff's The Age of Surveillance Capitalism for a long explanation on how behaviorism and behaviorist theories has influenced the way platforms are built and used. I do recommend you do that. My point is, a Skinner box proved that we are obviously very receptive to rewards. Right? We do something, we get a reward. That is really cool. What we also know from that is that if the causal connection between doing something and getting the reward is not always working, then we are getting, our trend is to do the thing more and more and more. It leads to a spiral of action, right? If we press a button and we get something, in this case, food with a pigeon, right? That's good. So next time you press the button, you get food. Perfect. But what if you press the button and nothing happens? Well, you go back and you press the button again, and you press the button again and again and again and again. So irregularity in that feedback makes it far more addictive. That's how gambling works, right? Because you can't guarantee that you win something, but you win once, you're going to come back. You win again, fine, you lose, you're going to come back, and you're going to come back again and again and again. This leads to to a very steep descent into addiction in a lot of ways. Now, step back and look once again at the idea of attention as something that we get when we upload a video on social media, right? We post something on social media, we get likes and so forth. That feels good. If we are someone who has been vulnerable in one way or another for, mental health reasons and so forth, because we have been marginalized, we do that. It feels really good. And suddenly that is taken away, and we can't actively really guarantee that we get the thing that we want or need, in this case, because there's a machine interlocked between that. It's very, very easy to fall into that trap of gambling with the algorithm, of doing more of it, of escalating it, of escalating it, basically, posting more extreme things, doubling down, all of that kind of stuff, because we want and need that feedback in one way or another, whether it is human connection through attention, likes, comments, and so forth, or something else. Which brings me to why gambling is such an apt metaphor here. What if money is involved? See, if you are marginalized, depending on what it is, it can be hard to actually, get into those wonderful jobs that some of us booktubers have and some of us don't. Because, if you have a physical disability, it will be harder to find a job. If you are younger, it will be harder to find a job because of how the economy works. If you are marginalized in any other way, if you are visibly different, depending on where you live, your sexual orientation or gender identity might be a reason for you to find less jobs and so forth. And these platforms do offer some money to some of us, right? You can monetize your channel. This one is monetized, right? And suddenly you get some money, and maybe all of this works out for you, and you get more and more money, and you are at the point where you can actually, make this your full-time job in one way or another. It's going to be hard at the beginning, but it works, and it's something that you can do on your own terms with all the quirks that you bring with you. And the money is in the same Skinner box as the attention, right? Do you see how this can be incredibly destructive for a lot of us? And that is, once again, where we need to talk about the Booktube needs to understand that this is a general problem, no matter who you are, no how old you are, whether you have a job and just do this as a hobby or not, because a lot of us don't have that privilege. A lot of us can't actually do that for whatever reason. Like, I'm on disability and unemployment at the moment. Luckily, because that means I don't need the 10 euros per month that YouTube pays out every, 7 months, I guess. But it is a real thing that we need to keep in mind. There is economic pressure here, and that it's not just a nice to have for some of us, but there is basically a system that some of us have been locked in, and it's more and more people getting locked into that system, right? And it doesn't get easier just because you suddenly have like 100,000 subscribers or whatever, right? That economic pressure is there, and once you are locked in this specific economic system, you are fully beholden to that algorithm, and that algorithmic logic that forces you to escalate again and again to up the numbers. So the platform still loves you because you're bringing in enough rent for them, because rent is at the end of the day what it is that we are building, that we're paying to these platforms by making content that gives them money, right? That's how that works. And that's a really, really dangerous setup. I think at this point we have hopefully figured out how the YouTube drama cycle works. And now we go to the sort of more or less anonymized but specific cycle. My hope so far is that I've shown you that it is important to understand the system that we are operating in. We need to understand how the system works. We need to educate ourselves how to deal with this, what to do about it, and so forth. And we need to understand that some people operating within this system are more vulnerable, more deeply locked in, more beholden to that system, whether they want to or not. And that means we need to show them grace. That's where we will be going with this. All right, now let's apply all of that to the YouTube drama cycle. Say you are someone who produces YouTube videos and on books, and it works, right? You're spending time, you're doing this, it works relatively well. You get attention, you get numbers, it's wonderful. It's sometimes a bit, difficult. It sometimes takes a lot of time. Sometimes you're out of ideas. It's something we've all struggled with as YouTubers over time, right? Sometimes you don't have the time, sometimes you have the idea, don't have the idea, and so forth. But it all kind of works. Say you make a video and it suddenly blows up. It goes viral. Yeah, it's not, millions of views because you're still operating in a small community, but suddenly it's not 100 views, it's 1,000 views, it's 10,000 views. That's really good. The numbers go up. If you get like a lot of attention, positive attention, and so forth, right? It feels good. YouTube tells you that it's good because every time you look on the back end, you get all those wonderful numbers. This is on number 1. It works really well. Make more videos like that. All of that stuff, right? If you are also getting money from this, suddenly you see YouTube shows you how much money every specific video makes. And suddenly your video doesn't make 50 cents. Suddenly your video makes $10 on its own. Maybe it makes $100. That's good. If you are actually relying on this as your actual full-time income, having a video that on its own makes €100, makes even maybe $1,000, you're set for the day, for the week, possibly even for the month. It's great. So naturally, you try to figure out what to do next. You do a different topic. It doesn't do as well. Maybe you go back to the previous topic because it did really well, right? So you go back and do that. And it still does kind of good, but maybe you didn't go as hard. Maybe you need to escalate. So you do that and you escalate further and further to keep the numbers sort of up. And it mostly slightly works because escalation logic does apply to YouTube because, it keeps engagement up. The more crass, the more out there your take is, the more people will watch, the more people will click. Even if they hate watch you, even if they just, hate comment and all of that, YouTube doesn't care. All right. Remember that these algorithms, while existing, can also be tweaked manually to keep a specific topic going on if a platform believes that this will make them money or so forth, right? Keep in mind, this is happening outside of that fictitious YouTuber's control. Pretty fucked up, right? Next part, you are someone who's on this platform. You know that it's kind of difficult. You don't want to rely only on just this platform because you can't. If this becomes more than just something you can do once per month or week because you have your life all organized and everything, right? You're aware that you're basically beholden to the gods of YouTube. So what you need to do is diversify. Use other platforms, right? You post some of your short-term content on, say, TikTok. You post some of it on Threads, whatever that is. I mean, obviously I know what it is, but I haven't used it because why would I? You post some of it on Twitter. You go to all these different platforms. What you need to understand, because, you need to spread yourself out. You hopefully draw more people into here. Maybe even get some people over to Patreon where you get some money and so forth, right? Join my Anyway, what you need to understand is each platform has its own codes. It has its own language, its own conventions and so forth. And if you only have 30 seconds or a minute or even 2 minutes, you can't actually put much nuance in your video, even if you wanted to. It's kind of difficult. So you need to double down even harder and exaggerate even more, escalate even more, which leads to, maybe you locking in too far, you doubling down too far, you're going a step too far. And that's when the whole thing just blows up. People that have not actually seen anything of this before jump in. They have opinions. They start piling onto you. They say stuff. And because you're already stretched thin as fuck, because this stuff has been, grinding you. You've been hustling. You've been grinding. You've been doing this. You've been on this fucking treadmill for months and months and months, trying to keep the numbers up, trying to keep the attention up, trying to keep the money up if you need the money, right? You keep doing this. And suddenly, it's just too much. Suddenly, it just is too fucking much. And that's the point where it won't stop, because everyone else is now on that sweet, high of getting all the views, of, piling on a drama in one way or another for them is great because it keeps the numbers up for them. But you're paying the price. You're paying the mental health price at this point. So you're stepping away. Whether it is because you made one video and everyone told you that you are wrong about how to do Booktube, whether it is you making a video where you said something a bit rash about a large group of people, it doesn't matter. You just have enough at that moment, and you need to step away, or things will be really, really, really harmful for yourself. And then everyone else realizes what they have done, and like guilty school children go like, well, maybe we went too far, we're really sorry, I guess this should never ever happen again. But because no one thought about why the thing happened that happened, yeah, it's going to be 2 months until the next person will quit Booktube for whatever reason they got piled on. And we'll do the whole thing again and again and again. So what can we do? That's the main question here. There are two things. See, we live on these platforms and we do these things on our own in one way or another. That's the big benefit that those platforms have, that YouTube has, right? It's YouTube. When we're talking about individuals, YouTube is the biggest fucking individual around. They have the deeper pockets. They have all the power. We don't. But each of us is sort of fighting for ourselves. It's my numbers, right? I don't benefit from your better views and so forth. It's all each for themselves. And personal responsibility is a fine thing, right? Don't be a dick, obviously. But personal responsibility only gets you this far. When you're up against the biggest fucking individual, the biggest fucking person around, which is, corporate personhood, but still. So each of us going well, clearly this should never happen, will not get us anywhere. Because there is a second part that comes with personal responsibility, and that is collective solidarity, right? We are all in this together. We are all in the place, on the platform, that is running according to needs that are not ours, that is running according to demands that are not ours. So we need to be understanding of all our fellow YouTube people here, whether it's commenter, whether it's, creators and so forth. We need to understand that they are all beholden to the same system. And only if we act together can we actually keep this thing going in a way that is not killing each of us slowly, right? That's the point. We need to be aware that others are suffering through things that might be harder for them than they are for us. We need to be aware of the fact that maybe, because it's easy for me, means that I have all kinds of other, privileges. Maybe, I can do all of these kind of things. We need to think about these things as a collective. We are in this together. And as a responsibility, I would argue, we need to educate ourselves. We need to think about these things. We need to step back. When we are interacting with these systems, we need to be aware of the fact that we are doing this according to someone else's rules, and they don't have our best interest at heart. We need to do something about that in that way. So to bring this all back together, something that has always annoyed me with YouTube, with Booktube, is that large parts of the bookish community pretend that they are not really part of YouTube as a whole. I think that is bullshit. Yes, this specific community or these specific communities have particularities, but they don't matter because the platform is still the big one. This is not real life. This is just the internet. It doesn't work. The internet is real life. We need to accept these things, and we need to act responsibly according to that. We need to educate ourselves, and we need to establish space for us in this system that is not run by us. So yeah, I don't know, show each other some grace, and read some books that explain how this shit works, so you are actually aware of what is going on. That's all I have for now. I don't know. read those books, read other books, like, subscribe if you want. There's a Patreon if you want to. There's a channel membership. There's PayPal or whatever down below. But, most importantly, be good people. I'll see you in the next one. And until then, thanks and cheers.